Welcome to our amazing segment called In Dialogue with our amazing host, Mr. Bharat Bhargava. In Dialogue has become an amazing part of our lives. Let's hear Mr. Bhargava's take on Amazing America. And I say, simply amazing in Dialogue.
Namaskar, I'm Bharat Bhargava. Thanks for joining In Dialogue. Folks, have you observed how, starting about the turn of the century, our young people have begun to increasingly use the intonation of a question at the end of their statements? Listen to this as an example. So there are these two great singers, Jayashree and Kalyani. Notice it was a statement up until Jayashree and then inflected question-like at end and transition to Kalyani. I perceive this phenomenon as a new form of politeness to the person one is speaking to. Interesting. Before coming to the US and since, I have been most amazed by the dynamism of American culture and by the fact that it keeps reinventing itself. So today, I'd like to celebrate the theme Amazing America by sharing some of my heartwarming experiences. For objectivity, I may also mention some unflattering situations, even as I maintain my unwavering adulation for America. Our title is Amazing America, not Perfect America. I will also include a couple of experiences from Canada where alike, and guided by a popular Facebook saying, I also plan to show you a few pictures. I apologize that because I will narrate the incidents chronologically, the subject would keep changing. Oh, by the way, if I remind you of your own such stories, I would love to receive them, and with your permission, I might share them on the program or have you personally do it. So, before I came here, I had a friend, Arun Mathur. You may have heard his name. I might have had certain style of speaking for which he used to often tease me. If he and other friends came to my house some evening and said, Bharat, film dekhne chaloge? I might have answered, हाँ film भी देख सकते हैं या फिर LMB चल के dinner भी कर सकते हैं. He would tease me by saying, नहीं ही क्यों नहीं कहते जुबान से, नहीं का काम क्यों लेते हो हाँ से. Soon after I came here, I was amused to see how often people here also replied, not by taking a strong contrary position, but offering options. This, obviously, I take it as a form of respect for the other person. So I wrote to Arun that here, नहीं कोई नहीं कहते जुबान से, नहीं का काम सब लेते हैं हाँ से. I came from India as a professor initially. So near the end of the academic year, I wrote the questions for the final exams and asked the head of the department if I should send them to the registrar's office. He said you could, but his office is generally very busy. Maybe you can have your secretary type up and get them printed. I was incredulous. In India, you know how there are layers upon layers of secrecy about exams. And here my 18-year-old secretary, who even dated some of my students, would type the exam. Ooh. 50 years later today, taking into account my exposure to dozens of countries, my belief has only strengthened that Americans are among the most simple people in the world. Not here, but here. This is not to put down other countries. I could sing praises of country after country, but today our theme is about America. You must have noticed in America, most new introductions start out with the full benefit of mutual trust. As a manager trained here, I have practically never in 45 years asked someone I hired to show me his or her college certificates. When I received my admission for MBA, I did not have enough money to pay for it. So I met with a student counselor and asked if the school would give any scholarship. He said no. I asked, how about assistantship? No again. So I said, there must be others who get admission but unable to come because they don't have enough finances. He said, that doesn't happen. I said, that's very interesting. They don't have money, but they don't lose their admission? He said, yes, with slightly mischievous smile, we give loans and know that you'll be able to pay it back. Then I knew he was simply joshing me. Even so, I asked, but I have 2 children and may need larger loan than some others. He said, "Did I say there was a limit to the amount of loan we can give you?" Times have changed, but at that time, they struck to me like, wow. My first full-time job was as an assistant manager for Asia at Roman Haas Company in Philadelphia. Agriculture chemicals was one of their products. One time when the Pakistan's Minister of Agriculture, Mr. A.A. Khan, visited us, he and Mrs. Khan also wanted to see New York, so I offered to take them. On our way, Mrs. Khan said, "Bhargava Sahab, my son is a big fan of Muhammad Ali, and he said maybe we could get his autograph." I can see that would not be possible. To agree. Later, as we were walking and we turned from 34th Street onto 5th Avenue, right in front of Empire State Building, Muhammad Ali was standing with a foot on his car bumper, signing away autographs. I said, "Mrs. Khan, look." She ran and got his autograph. One time I visited our company's plant in Knoxville, Tennessee. In the evening, the plant manager invited me and a few others for dinner. While they were most respectful, being face to face with a person of Indian origin seemed like a novelty to the people from this southern city. We talked about many subjects, including India. Then one of them popped the question, "We hear Indians can sleep on beds of nails. How is that possible?" We had all had a couple of martinis each, so I couldn't resist replying, "Well, it's not like someone up and decides one day that he'll sleep on nails. We start them when they're babies, and then to one nail first." They gave me the reaction I had hoped for, and keeping the goofiness alive, one asked me if my hotel had been able to provide me a bed of nails the night before. I said they did, but I had a very uncomfortable night. The nails were dull, rusted, and bent. During the primaries of 1968, Robert Kennedy came to Philadelphia. There were throngs of people, so I placed my 5-year-old daughter Jyotsna on my shoulders as his open vehicle passed. Seeing her, Bobby Kennedy leaned over and shook hands with her. They were such glorious days. A presidential candidate could campaign riding in an open vehicle. But then in June, he did get assassinated, and America lost one of the finest potential presidents. I remember crying. Narberth, where we lived in suburban Philadelphia, seemed like a true Norman Rockwell town with some of the finest people, totally content with their quality of life and community spirit. People came from long distances to see Narberth's fireworks and Memorial Day parades. One time we received a flyer announcing a meeting at the town hall in which civic association was to be formed. Wanting to be good residents of a place where we were raising our children, I went. We all introduced ourselves. When the officers were being elected, folks asked me to be the treasurer because I was a banker. Having to deal with numbers for many people is yuck. Some months later, the Borough Council proposed an ordinance that most people did not care for. During our civic association meeting about it, I may have made some suggestions which they felt okay about, so they asked me to express our opposition to the ordinance at the next council meeting. When I got done speaking in front of the council, the chairman said sarcastically, "It's very interesting that Mr. Bhargava is not even a U.S. citizen and he's representing the people of the borough." There was a roaring boo from all those gathered against the comment that the chairman had just made. That strengthened our position, and eventually the ordinance had to be scrapped. I had been overwhelmed by the affection the community had granted me. Long story short, there was a bit of a groundswell that I should run for borough council during the 1977 general elections. 70% of the citizens were Republican, and a Democrat had never been elected before. So at a coffee class during my campaign, one lady asked me what kind of Democrat I was, liberal or conservative. Frankly, I saw nothing liberal or conservative about decisions city councils make. Anyway, I replied, "I'm a banker, ain't I?" "Oh, good," she said, clearly having gotten the justification she was looking for to be able to vote for me. On my getting elected, folks there, local newspapers, our own India Abroad, gave profusely generous reactions. Denise Carroll, one of the community leaders, busted out saying, "It feels like Christmas." Here are some fine community leaders as voting counts were being announced. A few days later, I was shopping at the nearby A&P when I felt somebody tug my jacket from behind. I turned around and saw a nearly 80-year-old lady who said, if Harold was alive, he would be wondering what I was doing in the booth voting for a Democrat. I thanked her and gave a light hug. My younger cousin, the 5-hour energy guy, had an entrepreneurial fire in him even when he was a student. During the summer, he conducted a business for which he needed a truck. When summer ended, he found a buyer and agreed to drop off the truck at an agreed-upon place. He asked me if I could come with him so he could ride back with me. The gentleman was there, he paid the money, upon which Manoj asked if he had brought his license plates. The gentleman said no. So Manoj said, but I have to remove my plates. How are you going to drive? The man said, there are better things for the police to worry about in North Philadelphia than somebody driving without license plates. In July '89, about 5 months into his administration, President Bush Sr. invited a few of us to the White House to meet him. The president asked what was important to our community and also shared his own vision. What intrigued me most was his statement that went something like this: I simply want India to make more and more progress and would like to see you make whatever contribution you can. Interesting. A US president talking to US citizens, those who live in US, and asking us to contribute toward the progress of another country? I remember our journalist par excellence, Aziz Hanifa, interviewed me right afterwards on the White House lawn when, among other things, I expressed my being impressed with that. Only with time I fully understood that while the US expects and deserves our 100% loyalty, it is perfectly happy to see its citizens take interest in the well-being of the countries of their origin. Later, as an appointee of President Bush at Commerce one time, I got a second secretary so I could have greater and longer coverage I needed. I asked Janet to come at 7:30 and leave early, and Ethel to come and leave a couple of hours later. During early fall, Ethel came to me and said, Mr. Bhargava, I cannot work late schedule. I said, why? I have to be home before it gets dark, or I could be killed in some crossfire among the street gangs. Remembering his presidency, I have to say Mr. Bush is a very able and noble man. Here's one of my cherished pictures. The younger President Bush has become a bit controversial. We'll leave it to the historians to sort out the right and the wrong. I did not have any official connection with his administration, but I was amused by the disarming folksy style he had for a POTUS. One time I happened to be in a setting where very few people were there, in which anybody could walk over and chat with the president. An interesting protocol that I have observed is that when someone is speaking to the president, others in the vicinity maintain enough distance so they cannot hear what is being discussed, even as they are trying to inch closer to lock in their turn. I got my chance. So now in a setting like this, one doesn't walk up to the president and start talking about some huge policy matter like, sir, you shouldn't invade Iraq or something like that. So after a few niceties, I said, by the way, Mr. President, I also went to the B school. He said, oh yeah? What year? Class of 67. I said, to which he says, kind of old dude, aren't you? Another time when an invitation to go to White House for Christmas party came to me, Yog was in India, so I took my son Alok with me. When we got introduced, I exchanged greetings with the President and Mrs. Bush. Then Alok first said, Merry Christmas, Mr. President, and he got his response. Then he said, you're looking stunning, Mrs. Bush. And the President said, smart move. And it's true. Here's a quick view of the occasion. It's been fun chatting with you. Do visit www.indialogue.net. Have an amazing day.